Chicken feed that no one can mess with. Coming right up. Hey guys, I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Thanks for joining me here today on the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I'm making homemade feed for our chickens and ducks. You probably know there's been a lot of talk lately about certain brands of chicken feed and the whole rabbit hole about who produces them and whether or not they may have been sabotaged and why. With the end result being that many people's chickens were not laying any eggs. So I thought, what better way to ensure the integrity of your chicken feed than to make it yourself? You can always do better when you do it yourself. This is something that we've actually been interested in and mulling over for quite a while here in our home, since long before the tales of sabotage chicken feed. And here's why. We believe, actually we know, that there's a strong possibility that something will happen in our lifetime that might leave us on our own, so to speak. We may be unable to get things from the store for at least some period of time, and perhaps even the foreseeable future. Heck, we've already seen what can happen to the supply chain and how easy it is to disrupt that. So we try to be as self-sufficient as we possibly can with the circumstances we have to work with. We're always thinking along the lines of, how would we provide XYZ on our own without help from the outside world, if we needed to? Keeping our poultry is a big part of this. Our birds provide us with eggs, and they could provide us with meat if need be. They also reproduce. So theoretically, we have an unending source of protein in our backyard. So the birds could feed us if it all goes south. But how would we feed them if we're used to depending on store-bought feed? Now, to be fair, we free range our birds. So during the summer, they could probably fend for themselves and be just fine. But during the winters, here in Maine, it's a wasteland out there, and I'm pretty sure they'd starve to death without some help from us. So I've been thinking long and hard about homemade chicken feed. I've done plenty of research, and luckily it turns out that making your own chicken feed isn't too complicated. The ingredients involved are a variety of whole grains and seeds, and you just need to figure out a mix that provides the right balance of nutrients for your birds. There's so many different ingredients that you can use. We put together a list of a lot of common ingredients and their protein contents. You don't have to use all of these ingredients by any means, but that's one thing that I love about the concept of the homemade feed is that you can mix it up. It doesn't have to be the same every time. And the ingredients you choose can vary depending on what's available to you in your area, what you can get the best deals on, and things like that. I arranged my list by protein content from the highest to the lowest. And there are charts online listing the protein content of all these things. And as you purchase your ingredients, they'll also have the information listed on the package. What we want is the crude protein content. If something is sold as animal feed, it'll list the crude protein. And if it's a human grade ingredient, it will list the grams of protein per serving. And I can show you later on in the video how to calculate the crude protein from that information. I found as I gathered my ingredients that I was constantly updating the protein contents in my chart based on what my packaging said because it seems that it can vary depending on the producer, the crop, and things like that. I didn't purchase all of the possible ingredients on my list, but I got a good variety of what was available to me. Now you can see these first two ingredients here, fish meal and soybean meal. I did not get these two. I did list them because you do see them used in a lot of homemade feed recipes. And you can see why, because they're both very high in protein. And I think they're probably low cost, depending on where you are in the country. But these two are both kind of controversial ingredients. Soy, many people want to avoid soy. They want a soy-free feed, largely because soy is a highly genetically modified crop, and for other health and allergy-related reasons. The fish meal, some people want to avoid because coming from fish, it's very prone to be contaminated with things like heavy metals. So for those reasons, and because I couldn't find a good source for those regardless, I'm not using those in my feed. Now, there are a few other ingredients that we want to make sure we have for our homemade chicken feed. I'm going to be using kelp, and this is animal grade kelp. It's cheaper than buying the kelp that we humans can eat. This is also animal grade brewer's yeast. This is also cheaper than buying the brewer's yeast that humans can eat. Now these are going to provide all sorts of nutrients. The kelp has iodine and antioxidants, all sorts of good things. The brewer's yeast has a lot of B vitamins, a lot of minerals. If you don't want to use these two or you can't find these two, although I will have links to where I got these both online, but if you don't want to use these, there's something you can use called Poultry Nutri Balancer, and I'll put a link to that as well. I'm trying to avoid using that. That's basically an organic nutritional supplement that will give them all of the nutrients that they need. It's a little bit pricey, and that's why I decided to go with the kelp. and the brewer's yeast. But if you want, you can get the NutriBalancer. I'm actually ordering some poultry NutriBalancer just to have on hand, just in case, but I'm going to be using these in my feed. And these are 1/2 gallon glass jars. I dumped these out of the bags that they came in into these jars to store them in, but I do keep them in smaller containers just for ease of use on an everyday basis. These are 1/2 pint jars, and they have the regular mouth, so I've got Parmesan cheese lids on top of them so I can open them up and scoop out of them. Now, I'm not going to mix any of these supplements into my feed, but I'm going to rather add them as I feed it. Why? Well, these ingredients are kind of fine and powdery ingredients, so I'm afraid they would, number one, sink to the bottom of the bin that they're mixed up in. And we're also planning on soaking and fermenting our feed, so I don't want the powders to get poured off with the liquid. So I'll be adding them at the time of feeding. And both of those things do have these handy little feeding charts that tell you exactly how much to feed your animals. I've actually been also adding them to our dogs and our cats' food as well. It's so good for them, and they've been enjoying it. The other couple of ingredients that you want to make sure you have is something like oyster shell to give calcium for the chickens. This can be just fed free choice. You don't have to mix this into the feed, oyster shell. Another thing you can use for calcium is crushed up eggshells, from your own eggs. You can reuse those. We use crushed eggshells in all sorts of things, especially gardening. So I have oyster shell because we don't usually have a whole bunch of extra crushed eggshells because we use them in so many things. The other thing you want to make sure that you have available for your chickens is grit, of course, your chickens, your ducks, your poultry. Now, because our birds are free range, I don't think they really need this, but we do have it. If your birds are free range, they're going to be getting grit from the ground when they're roaming around. This just helps them with their digestion, so you want to make sure you have this also as free choice. The feeds that I'm making today are designed for laying hens because that's what we have right now. Keep in mind that there are different requirements for growing chicks, for broilers, and things like that. But I think the most common feed type that people are looking to make is layer feed. For a layer feed, you want to end up with at least 16% protein. It can be more, but it shouldn't be less. I've got a couple of recipes that come in just over the 16%. Now, we personally have both ducks and chickens. They live together, they eat together, and there's no separating that here. Ducks require a little bit more protein than chickens. So what I'm going to do today is show you 3 different recipes that we came up with. 2 of them come in just over the 16%, around 17% protein, and they're great for laying chickens. And then there's one recipe that's a little bit higher in the protein, up around 20%, and that is going to be good for chickens and ducks. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to mix these up in small batches, about 10 pounds at a time, because I think that's going to be more easily manageable for me to mix everything well. I don't want to be, mixing huge quantities at a time. So I'm going to mix up 10 pounds at a time. We typically buy our feed in 40 or 50 pound bags. So if I mix up 4 or 5 of these 10-pound batches, that's going to be equivalent to one of the bags of feed that we would buy at the store. Another good thing about mixing up small batches is that I can test out these different recipes and see how the birds like it. There might be certain things that they, pick out, leave behind, things that they don't eat, and I may not want to make a really large batch of food using those ingredients. So this is going to give me a chance to try this out, try out the different recipes, and see how it goes before I commit to making a really large batch. So what we did is we listed out all the ingredients that we had available to us. We listed the protein contents, and then I sat down and I figured out how much they cost me per pound to buy those ingredients. Now, if you do this for yourself, that's probably going to vary. You're not going to have the same prices as me. It's going to vary depending on what part of the country you're in, what type of stores you have available to you. If you're in a highly agricultural area of the country, you probably have more things available to you and probably are going to get better prices on some of these things than some people in other areas of the country. A lot of what I got here, probably the bulk of what I got here, I ordered from Azure Standard, and that's available to most people in the country. You probably have a drop somewhere near you, and if you don't, you can have things shipped directly to you, or if you're buying enough stuff at once, you can actually be your own drop. I think it's $800, I believe, is what it takes to be considered a drop. There are plenty of families who order, once or twice a year, big bulk orders, and can easily constitute a drop all by themselves. If you think you don't have Azure Standard available in your area, go ahead and check again. I'm going to put their website down in the description box because they are a great source for most of these ingredients, because that's what happened to me. I had checked them out and they didn't have a drop in my area. They didn't have a drop in my state entirely. But after a few months, the next time I checked, lo and behold, we have a drop 10 minutes up the road from us. So even if you've written them off in the past, definitely check them out again. Just look at all these gorgeous whole grains and seeds. So first we've got whole corn. Now, one of the good things about corn is that it's very, very, very inexpensive. It's low in protein, but it's a good filler. Now, some people prefer to make feed without corn, and you can certainly do that. The great thing about these recipes is that you can adjust them to exactly how you want them. We are using corn right now because in the winter, we actually give our birds extra corn because it gets really cold here in Maine, and that helps them to stay warm. And we're definitely still in the tail end of winter here. We just had a big snowstorm dump a bunch of snow on us the other day. It's definitely below freezing at night, and some of our days are even below freezing. So we're still giving them corn, so we're going to be doing some corn in our feed today, but we'll probably cut back on the corn as the year goes by and it gets warmer. And then we've got some wheat. Now this is hard red wheat. That's what the HR stands for. You can also use soft white wheat, but hard red wheat has more protein. So if you're only going to use one kind of wheat, this is what I would choose. Wheat has a lot of nutrients when it's a whole grain like this. It's pretty inexpensive. And the great thing about this wheat is this is the same hard red wheat that we store for ourselves, which I think is awesome. And next I've got some whole oats here. You can use whole oats, you can use regular old-fashioned oats, whatever you have to use up. I'm using the whole oats because any whole grain is going to have a lot more nutrients than a grain that's been processed, and it has more protein in the whole oats. Next, we've got some split peas. Once again, one thing that I love about this ingredient is that these are the same split peas that we're storing for ourselves. I got a really great deal on these split peas from Azure Standard. And these are very high in protein. These have, I think, 24 to 25% protein, so they can really boost the protein content for not a whole lot of extra money. They're one of my less expensive high protein ingredients. We've got barley. Of course, that's another grain. There's all sorts of whole grains that you can use. Wheat, oats, barley, Milo, which is also known as sorghum. I don't have Milo today, but I am going to be ordering it. Azure Standard was actually out of it, so that's why I don't have it. I did buy a birdseed mix that contained Milo as well as some other ingredients, but I actually didn't end up including that in any of my recipes today because it's pretty low in protein, especially compared to the cost. And then flaxseed. Now flaxseed is definitely a superfood. Flaxseed is full of omega-3s, fatty acids that are really good for your heart and your joints and your brain and all sorts of different things. Once again, these flax seeds are the same flax seeds that I could store for our consumption. I love flaxseed as an ingredient for my feed because if you think about some of those expensive brands of eggs that they sell at the store and they tout them as being more nutritious and having, more of the omega-3 fatty acids, part of the reason that they have that is because they put flax in their chicken's feed. And so that's essentially what we're going to be doing. We're going to be boosting the nutrition in our eggs through using flax seeds in our feed. And because it's very high in protein, we can use a lot less of it in the feed because it is a slightly higher cost ingredient. And then what I've got here, Boss black oil sunflower seeds. These are a great ingredient for our homemade chicken feed. I got a pretty good deal on these at our local feed store. These are full of oils and fats. They have a pretty high protein content, and they're going to make our chicken's feathers all healthy and glossy. And the last thing that I have to use in these recipes today is this tub of meaties. Meaties is like a 70% hulled sunflower seeds, but these are the striped sunflower seeds, not the black oil sunflower seeds. I kind of threw these in at the last minute. I was looking for, ways the cheapest way to include raw sunflower seeds in the diet for their deworming properties. I'm unsure whether the black oil sunflower is a natural dewormer, like typical raw sunflower seeds, but I don't know why it wouldn't be. Also, this ingredient ended up being more expensive than the black oil sunflower and have a slightly lower protein content, so I'm not sure if I'll continue to include this in my feed ingredients. I definitely think I'll be refining some of the ingredients that I choose because as I'm doing this, I am finding certain things that have a higher cost for a lower protein content or lower nutrition that I can probably weed out of my ingredients as we go along, but it's a learning experience. But we put all of our ingredients with their protein contents and the cost per pound into a spreadsheet, and that allowed us to change the amounts of different ingredients to play around with the formula, and it would calculate the protein content of the end result for us, and it would calculate the cost per pound or the cost per batch, and I think we divided it out to find the cost per pound. And then if you're not using a spreadsheet to figure out the amount of protein, you can just take the number of pounds that you have of each ingredient. So we've got I just took one of these recipes, the first recipe for example, and you multiply it by the percent of protein. 9% would be 0.09, 15% is 0.15, 24%, 0.24, and so on and so forth. So then you multiply out 3 times 0.09, 3 times 0.15, so on and so forth, and these are the numbers that you get over here. Add them up, that's 1.71, and you divide that by the total pounds of feed, which we had 10 pounds of feed. So when you divide the 1.71 by the 10 pounds of feed, you get 0.171, which is equivalent to 17.1%, which is the same thing that we got by doing it through the spreadsheet. So that's what you can do if you don't have a spreadsheet program, or you don't know how to work it, or you just don't want to. So that's what's really wonderful about this whole concept, is that you can really customize it. You can change it up. You can change it for the seasons. Like I said, we add more corn during the winter. You can change it for, nutritional needs. If you find that your chickens aren't laying as much, you can try to boost up the protein a little bit and see if that can help them out. If it gets to be winter, you can add more of the fats and the corn and things that are going to put a little weight on them and help them, stay warm through the winter a little bit better. So like I said, we came up with 3 different recipes that I'm going to be making today. The first recipe is very simple. It's 30% corn, 30% wheat, 20% split peas, 10% flaxseed for those omega-3s, 10% whole oats. And it comes out to just over 17% protein and 65 cents a pound based on the prices that I paid for these ingredients. Now, I will say the flaxseed, I bought this from Azure Standard, and I think I got a 25-pound bag, and I could have actually gotten a 50-pound bag and saved even more and gotten a better price on that. So if this ends up working well and we end up liking the homemade chicken feed, I will probably order the 50-pound bag next time, which will lower my cost even further. So how I'm going to do this is I've got a scale to weigh out my ingredients, and I've got another one of these little tubs. I love these tubs. I got these at Dollar Tree, $1.25. That's not bad. I think this will be enough to hold 10 pounds, one 10-pound batch, and it will be easy for me to stir it in. It's flexible, so I can, pour it easily into a larger container. So that's my plan. As far as a container to keep your finished feed in, metal garbage cans are a great place to keep feed like this because they're pretty impervious to rodents. Your mice and your rats aren't going to be able to chew through the metal. They're not going to be able to squeeze in through the lid. Anything, raccoons, nothing can really get into these metal. Well, raccoons might be able to. So I'm going to get started on this first recipe. So the first thing I'm going to do is the corn, and I'm going to do 3 pounds of corn. I'll probably only be able to put 1 or 2 pounds in this at a time. All right, so there's 1 pound of corn. Three pounds of corn. Now I'm going to go ahead and add 3 pounds of our wheat. 1, 2, 3. Next, I'm adding 2 pounds of the split peas. 1, 2, 1 pound of the flaxseed, and finally 1 pound of whole oats. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix this all together. Look at how beautiful that is already. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm expecting from this feed. First and foremost, I'm expecting it to be healthier. I really believe that this is going to be a healthier way for us to feed our birds than the way that we have been feeding them. And we'll get more nutritious and more plentiful eggs in return. Number 2, I expect happy birds. Whenever I'm dishing out a bowl full of dry, processed, commercial kibble or pellets to any of my animals, I can't help but think how miserable I would be if I had to eat the same old thing every single meal, of every single day. This is going to give them the opportunity for variety and for real whole foods, and I think they're going to love it. Number 3, I expect this to be more sustainable and SHTF proof. We now know how to make our own feed. We can store these whole raw ingredients in large quantities. Whole grains can store a lot longer than processed feed. And as you may have noticed, a lot of these items are things that we can also eat. So storing double duty items will save us time and space and ensure that nothing goes to waste. It will also help us rotate those less frequently used items more quickly, ensuring that our own preps stay fresher. We can also focus on learning to grow many of these items if we don't already, grow them ourselves for a more dependable supply. But more importantly, the knowledge that we've gained during this process and our better understanding of the nutritional needs of our birds will make us better equipped to be able to feed them no matter what is available to us. It gives us adaptability. So what am I not expecting from this feed? Well, mostly I'm not expecting it to be cheaper. I'm not expecting this to save us money over buying the feed. Now, if we'd been buying a high quality organic feed all along, then yes, this might save us a little bit of money. But we haven't been. We've been feeding them basically the worst and cheapest processed junk food there is. And I really felt terrible about it. The food we've been buying cost us about 36 cents a pound. And almost all of my single ingredients cost more than that. So there's no way that I'm going to make a feed that's less expensive than what we've been buying. But I do think that the trade-off of happier, healthier chickens is worth it. So I'm hoping that even though this isn't cheaper, we can at least make it affordable enough to be sustainable, to be able to keep doing this for the long term. There's a few things that we're going to do that's going to help us with this. We're going to start soaking and fermenting our feed and sprouting some. Doing this can help save money on the feed because the birds typically eat less feed. Not only does the soaking increase the actual volume of the food, but it also makes the food more digestible and the nutrients more readily available in their digestive system. So they essentially are getting more nutrition from less food. Like I mentioned before, we do free range our birds. They also have free access to an open compost pile that they get a lot of fruits and vegetables out of and bugs. They get lots of leftover waste from our kitchen. We'll definitely be continuing these practices. I'm also hoping and planning, really hoping and planning, to start raising mealworms and black soldier fly larvae to supplement their feed. These are both a great source of protein, and the black soldier fly larvae especially are a great source of calcium. Now, I'm definitely not a bug person. I don't like bugs. So if I can do this, and it remains to be seen whether I can because I haven't done it yet, but I'm really, really planning on doing this. And if I can do it, then anyone can. Also keep in mind what I said about this being a feed for laying birds. If you're feeding birds with different nutritional needs, you'll have to make some adjustments. This homemade feed is infinitely adaptable. I've listed quite a few ingredients that can be used, including some that I didn't buy or use myself, but there's still many more that aren't listed that you can always go and add your own options and make this feed exactly what you want and need it to be and what your birds want it to be. If there's an ingredient that you don't want to use in your feed, then just don't use it. Replace it with something else. The second recipe that we made is higher in protein, so this is going to be one that we're going to use since we have ducks and they have a little bit higher protein requirement. This recipe has 20% black oil sunflower seeds, 20% wheat, 10% flaxseed, 10% meaties, 10% split peas, 10% oats, 10% barley, and 10% corn. And this recipe comes in at just over 20% protein, and it's 72 cents a pound at the cost that I paid for my ingredients. The third recipe that we put together doesn't contain any corn because just like there are people who don't want to use soy in their feed, there are also people who don't want to use corn. Corn isn't the most nutritious grain or ingredient that you can use, but it's a good low cost, low protein filler to balance out those higher protein ingredients. And in the wintertime, if you live in a cold climate, it's important to give them a little bit more corn to help them keep warm and fatten up. This corn-free recipe includes 25% barley, 25% wheat, 15% oats, 15% split peas, 10% flax seeds, and 10% black oil sunflower seeds. This one comes in at just over 18% protein and 66 cents a pound. So now we've got these 3 gorgeous whole grain feed blends, and these are going to be so much more nutritious than any pellets we can buy at the store because the process that they put the grains through to make the pellets between the grinding and the heating and the extruding is going to take a lot of nutrition out of them. And once a grain has been ground and broken down, it loses its nutrition very quickly. So this is going to be much more nutritious, and also consider the fact that we're starting with healthier grains and better quality grains to begin with. Now, it's always good to introduce any animal to a new feed gradually. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start by mixing this with the feed that we already give them, and gradually increasing the amounts of the new feed and decreasing the amounts of the old feed. The amount of feed that you should give your chicken is about a half a cup per bird per day. If you ferment your food like we're going to do, you can usually cut that down just about in half, but we're going to start with a half a cup per bird per day. If you find that you have food left over at the end of the day that they haven't eaten, then you can definitely reduce that amount. Now, also don't forget that you do need to add the kelp and the brewer's yeast to the feed. These are both nutritional supplements, so you need to make sure that you add these so that the animals get all the nutrition that they need. Now, if you're not going to soak or ferment the feed, you can add these right into the feed and mix it. I just want to make sure that this is going to be in the feed. It's not going to get rinsed out or fall to the bottom, so I'm going to be adding it as I serve it after it's been soaked and fermented. The kelp should be 1 to 2% of the volume of the entire feed. So for each half cup serving, I'm going to be giving a 1/4 teaspoon of the kelp. The brewer's yeast, they can have a little bit more. This is also water soluble, so anything extra besides what they need will just get excreted. They can't get too much of this. For the brewer's yeast, I'm going to be giving a 1/2 tablespoon per half cup serving. Of course, if you're not doing the kelp and the brewer's yeast, or you can't find them in your area or anything like that, then you can go ahead and use the poultry Nutri-Balancer according to the directions on the package. I believe that's also 1 to 2% of the volume of the feed. And now let's go see how they like it. I am so excited to try this out. Now, I did promise you that I would show you how to calculate the percent of protein in food that's marketed for humans that we buy at the grocery store. If you buy food that's marketed as animal feed, it should be labeled with the crude protein content, and it'll look something like this. If it's food that's marketed for humans, it's going to give you the grams of protein per serving. So what we need to do is we need to take the grams of protein per serving, and we need to find out the serving size in grams. So this one serving is 49 grams. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide the grams of protein. We're going to divide it by the grams of the serving size. So 12 divided by 49. And we're going to see that these split peas have roughly 24% protein. I want to thank you, friends, for coming along with me on this journey of making our own chicken feed. As always, I appreciate the time that you spend here with us. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful or at least entertaining. If you like videos like this, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out and we appreciate it so much. Let us know down in the comments. Do you keep birds? Have you ever made your own feed for them? What has your experience been? We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you check out the description box below the video, where we'll have links to different resources that we've used or mentioned in the video, as well as links to Azure Standard, where you can find the best prices and the best quality on a lot of these ingredients. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me one of these grain emojis down in the comments. And you might enjoy checking out this haul where I got most of the items that I used today. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.